Welcome to the first recorded episode, in fact, of what I'm going to be calling Gap Discipline, a Dynasty Fantasy Football podcast predominantly, but we're going to have some real NFL laden things in there. And you know what? I'm going to have to intro the pod at another time, another episode, because things are flying in the NFL right now with this NFL coaching circle. So I apologize. I just got home not all that long ago. I forgot to brush my hair this year, and I was on the road in New Hampshire for a couple of days and, been following the coaching cycle. Figured I had some time. I'm starting to think about what I want to say, what I want to do. And all of a sudden, the Giants of all teams, my team, is striking while the iron's hot. So got home not all that long ago, kind of jotted some things down, and I'll just get started here with the Giants. But this is going to be not terribly fantasy related this time. The coaching cycle is here for such a short period of time. So again, welcome in. If you like this type of content, or if you have ideas for other things that you want to see, interact with all of the buttons and the comment boxes and all that crap. But I'd like to get this going, get this moving, and push it on all the platforms. And this is one of my favorite times of the year, hands down. So I'm going to start with the Giants, and then from there we'll move into the remaining head coaching vacancies, and I'll make my best predictions as to who I think is going to land where and why. John Harbaugh. In Jersey, New York, but Jersey. Can you believe? I still can't believe it. I actually fell asleep before midnight, so I missed the news break. And I had people on all my leagues texting me like, "Oh my God, congratulations!" And I woke up to a gift. I'm not expecting Ravens level success. I am expecting Ravens level competency. 5 years, $100 million for John Harbaugh right here. What the last 5 years have been like, it's just nothing but misery. The peace of mind I'm going to have for presumably the next 5 years that John Harbaugh is going to be my head coach is a weight off my shoulders, and weight off of many Giants fans. I can guarantee you. Is he a perfect coach? No, but it will be nice to be able to set a foundation and really, really take this team to a place we haven't been in a very long time. So equally as important, though, to this John Harbaugh situation is him bringing over Todd Monken, the offensive coordinator. Right after John Harbaugh was fired, truthfully, I was trying to talk myself into a situation where I would be okay with hiring Todd Monken as a head coach because I didn't know what his availability would be. So what I was hoping for was maybe Kevin Stefanski, bringing him back because they do have a little bit of history together. But the reason for that is because I think Todd Monken is a dynamite fit for what Jackson Dart is right now. So not only did Todd Monken unlock MVP level Lamar Jackson, first he was good, now he's a GOAT. He was also the architect of famous Jameis Winston down in Tampa Bay all those years ago. After that stop, he went down to the University of Georgia, where he oversaw the offense for the back-to-back national title teams. And quite a cast of deep threats, we'll call them. So he worked with George Pickens. He worked with Ladd McConkey. He worked with Brock Bowers. He even worked with Adonai Mitchell down there. Then he comes over and starts, his Baltimore tenure. But this is who Todd Monken is. Todd Monken is a power run, heavy play action, bombs away type of offense. He's bringing that to Jackson Dart. And Jackson Dart, so I just pulled out a few stats per next gen stats. Deep target percentage. This is across all quarterbacks for the 2025 season. Percent of targets that you're pushing 20 yards or more downfield. Lamar Jackson this year was third. Jackson Dart was seventh. This is who we knew he was going to be. He threw tons of deep balls at Ole Miss. We weren't sure what he was going to look like in a structured offense. I think he acquitted himself okay, all things considered. The receivers were beyond hurt this year. The offense was beyond ineffective this year, but he put a lot of flash on tape. Deep target percentages on passes that take longer than 2.5 seconds to develop. So this is long, deep drops. This is play actions. This is holding on to the ball and letting those long plays develop and then taking that big shot. Lamar, 6th this year. Jackson Dart was 2nd. And I mean, you don't immediately think about Lamar and Dart being the same player, but the more you think about them buying time in the pocket, scrambling back and forth, just letting those receivers scramble open, there is a lot of similarity to how they approach the deep game. The last one I'll throw out there. EPA per drop back on tight window throws. So these are high difficulty, either because the quality of the throw is very difficult to make. This also encompasses the fact that the Giants wide receiver room was just beleaguered this year and no one was getting separation. So Lamar was 13th this year. Dart was number 1 in the NFL. So I am beyond excited on what this could look like in a year or two. We still need to fix some things on the offensive line long term. I don't think we're done with receivers. I think we could use another big, deep threat and get these, get Neighbors back and healthy and get these two running some insane deep patterns and let Jackson just find them downfield. We have awesome defensive front, but if I get John Harbaugh and I get Todd Monken and you're telling me I have to take Zach Orr as defense coordinator, I think that's a fair price to pay. I'll figure it out. I will sleep peacefully at night. But let's get into remaining head coaching vacancies. There are 8 positions with the Giants filling up. How we're going to do this, instead of just throwing it all in a ball, I'm going to have a tier 1 spots, tier 2 spots, and tier 3 spots. And I'm going to name specific head coaching candidates in those tiers based on their quality as well as where I think they're going to fit. Let's start off. Tier 1. It's not even a question. There's only 2 coaching spots that I think are tier 1. That's Baltimore. That's Pittsburgh. These positions are never open, ever. Both of their previously tenured coaches were there for almost 20 years. The NFL does have somewhat of a quick trigger finger problem where you don't have a lot of time to see your entire vision through. You don't have a lot of leeway to, make mistakes and come out whole on the other side. We'll talk about some of these other landing spots in the lower tiers a little bit later, but what these 2 positions provide more than anything else is the ultimate stability. Whoever takes these jobs, they're going to have the freedom to fully unpack their ideas, fully set who they're going to hire. And ownership is largely going to stay out of the way. Nobody's going to go over your head. Nobody's going to scrutinize over who you're bringing in. They're not going to make you take, certain quarterback deals that end up being the worst trades in NFL history. Not every job is the same. These 2 stand alone. Not only just the prestige that they provide, but the ownership involved, down to the culture and the players that are still there. And these 2 teams are going to do their homework because they're 2 of the most savvy organizations in the NFL. They don't have to play around with, first timers. They don't have to play around with, the average coaching candidate cycle. So I've only got 4 names up here. 4 names that I would seriously consider for these positions whatsoever. So we'll start with the chalk one, the buzziest, the busiest, the one that's on everybody's lips, and that's Jesse Minters. He's the defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Chargers. So he hails from the Mike Macdonald tree. Mike Macdonald was the former defensive coordinator for the Ravens. Just a couple years ago, he was an assistant under Macdonald. Macdonald takes the Seahawks job and is knocking out of the park. They're one of the best teams in the league this year. If you understand what the name Sean McVay or the name Kyle Shanahan means in offensive circles, without hyperbole, Mike Macdonald, you could make a case, is the Shanahan of defense. And just like when Kyle Shanahan came into his own, and so did Sean McVay, so too did the league in return start picking from their coaching trees. Think about how many head coaching candidates have come up and been like, oh, well, he's from Sean, he's from Kyle. They got a lot of run with these guys. That is what's beginning to happen off the Mike Macdonald tree, and specifically with Jesse Minter. He is the first. He's like the Sean McVay here. So he is a highly sought after defense coordinator. I'm pretty sure every available team wanted him in for an interview. I think he would fit in either of these 2 jobs. If I'm Jesse Minter, I wouldn't settle for any job less than these 2. If I don't get into Baltimore and I don't get into Pittsburgh, I'm taking my ball and I'm going back to LA and I'm trying again next year for a couple of reasons. Number one really has nothing to do with him. It's about Jim Harbaugh, his head coach. Not that Jim can do anything. He can't block Jesse Minter from getting a promotion. But if I'm Jim Harbaugh, I just had to fire Greg Roman, the only offensive coordinator I've ever had in the NFL, period. I don't want to lose both my coordinators in the same year. Perfect example is what happened to the Lions this year. We talk about the brain drain that happens when successful teams, their coordinators and their assistants get hired away and then they have to replace. Sometimes that causes a step back. So the Lions are the candidate this year. At the year before that, you had the Eagles who lost both their coordinators coming off the Super Bowl win, and they took a step back the following year. If Jim just had to fire Greg Roman, the list of names on offense who have worked with Jim Harbaugh is a very short list. So now he's tasked in finding someone that he trusts as a head coach to go run his offense again. And because it's a short list for Jim, it's also a short list for Jesse Minter, which means unless you're taking a chance on an outside hire, which you can absolutely do, you as Jesse Minter are taking effectively the sloppy seconds of a very offensively thin talent pool for play callers and coordinators. So who do I bring with me when it is my time? You and I are sitting here talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Baltimore Ravens jobs being open and available. Nobody is safe at this point. And if you just look at next year, you can squint and see about 9 teams. And I'm not even talking about like all bottom feeders or anything. There's like 9 legitimate teams that could be in the conversation for a head coach next year. Really quickly, you got the Bucs. There was questions whether or not Todd Bowles was going to be back this year. He ultimately is, but if that doesn't improve, he could be out. The Bills, same thing. If they falter in the playoffs again, Sean McDermott could be out. The Browns, we'll talk about a little bit later. The Bengals, the Colts, that might happen too. Jets, enough said. Commanders, Dan Quinn had to get rid of both his coordinators. Same thing with the Eagles. If Sirianni does not nail this offense coordinator hire, he could be done. And the Packers, we saw that collapse against the Bears. Technically, Matt LaFleur could still be fired. So if I'm Jesse Minter and I have no imminent threat of being pushed out or passed over or anything like that, and I can go back to my original team and just coach for another year and set the clock back and try again next year, I'm probably going to be just as much in demand next year as I am this year, barring some catastrophe that happens in LA. That's always a risk, but I'm willing to do it. So that's enough about Jesse Minter. Let's go to Brian Flores, who I don't know if everybody else would keep him in this status, but I definitely would. Brian Flores is the defense coordinator from the Vikings. Flo's been lurking a long time. First of all, he's been a head coach, came up through the New England coaching tree, was a defense coordinator there, defensive assistant, won Super Bowls, got the Miami job, ended up not panning out. They had a falling out, may or may not have been on board with the Tua Tagovailoa pick. That sounds like it might have been an ownership decision in the aftermath. There was also a very weird collusion-y effort with the Dolphins owner trying to cozy up to Tom Brady and trying to cozy up to Sean Payton at that time. And he ended up filing a wrongful termination suit against the NFL, which is actually still in effect right now. Lands with the Pittsburgh Steelers for a season on his feet, just a linebacker coach, assistant, something like that. And then he landed with the Vikings, and he's been dynamite. Flo specifically is a very different flavor of defense coordinator than what, like, say, Jesse Minter calls. So Jesse Minter is very top-down, very buttoned up, creative stuff that they do on the back end. He's on the modern edge of defense, whereas Flores is a lot more, not freelance, but bit more cavalier, a bit more aggressive. He shows a lot of like zero blitz. He's very unafraid and willing to dictate to an offense, which is a very useful skill if you are a defensive mind. If you can scare your opponents out of their comfort zone, you gain so much leverage in coverage, in blitz packages, and he's just been dominating in Minnesota without a ton of talent. Their front talent's okay. The secondary has been in shambles for years, and you very rarely see that be their undoing because they're just so well coached and so great at communicating. But overall, I think he's rehabbed his image very well over the last few years. One of the two best coaches to come from the Bill Belichick tree. The other technicality being Mike Vrabel, because technically Mike Vrabel's not actually a New England disciple. He's just a former New England player. He came up through the Texans and then got the Titans job and then is succeeding in New England right now. And that's important for Flores in the sense that he actually is from the New England tree. And while it feels like ancient history now, we're not that many years removed from Bill Belichick, leaving his post at New England. And everybody knows New England assistants never succeed away from daddy. They fall off, die out, and then they return. And it happens all the time. And so there was legitimate question if the Patriot way was officially dead. And I think as it pertains to Brian Flores, I think it helps to see Vrabel succeeding in New England right now. Just that little bit of peace of mind that any interested front office wouldn't be taking the poison pill on hiring the ex-Belichick assistant. But he commands a locker room. He's a great coach. He's a great person, leader of men in that way, that CEO type of coach. I think he could do really well in this. Third one, it's a college guy. I personally rarely bring up college because it's off-season fodder most of the time. There are so many established college coaches that would never even dream of leaving the college ranks. The one that I would actually give real credence to this year is Notre Dame's Marcus Freeman. So he is the prototype culture coach. He's the leader of men. He is a fixture in college football. He's very similar to Tomlin too, whereas Tomlin was very much huge coach between the ears as well as between the numbers and backs up results time and again. So the reason that I would put up Marcus Freeman, I like this point that I heard on a few podcasts, that there's something to be said for Notre Dame being an independent college program and not belonging to a conference. So when you have to schedule your own games, the way that they do, the benefit to that is that you are effectively creating your schedule against the best college talent and thereby the best future NFL prospects. There's something to be said with the amount of success that Marcus Freeman has had in doing so. College football is not my area. I'll be straight up with you. But the other thing being is that let's not mince words. The Fighting Irish have taken a step back success-wise, and you could argue that it could be time to cash in on that. And if Marcus Freeman or, Lincoln Riley or one of these guys, if they don't jump at an opportunity like Baltimore or Pittsburgh, they're never coming. You're never going to find a position better than this right now. You're not leaving a legendary college career to go coach for the Jets. That's not on the table. This is a different universe of opportunity here. So again, if he doesn't take it this time, or if somebody doesn't take it this time, it's just never going to happen. Last guy that I'll leave in this fourth guy in this tier one of coach is Kevin Stefanski, which he's the newly fired ex-Brown head coach, but I love the guy. Honestly, I think he's probably the most hireable coach in this cycle. I think he fits so many different situations and offenses and skill sets. Basically, everywhere he's gone, he's just made it work. Chiefly among them, I mean, you are a folk legend in the town of Cleveland. I know it ends badly, but for this guy to drag the Browns kicking and screaming out of the darkness, not only to their first playoff appearance in decades, but to win that game, you're set for life in Cleveland. You never have to pay for a drink again. And in spite of the horrendous situations that were going on, thought you had it great with Baker. He tears his shoulder. Brass loses faith and loses trust and ships him out. Make the worst trade in NFL history. And you have that albatross hanging over your cap, your player development, your culture, your locker room, your ability to make a team and do your job for years and years. And you still oversee a borderline elite defense. You still take the riffraff of backup quarterbacks and string together decently successful seasons. Another playoff appearance in there as well. There's just a unique, rare level of comfortability that you just kind of believe Kevin Stefanski's going to figure it out. And not every team can say that. These situations are so volatile and reactive and interdependent. Stefanski's like super safe, and not just super safe, but like super safe. And you want him in the building because you feel like he's going to do good things. So if I've got to pick right now, I would pick Flores in Baltimore. I would pick Freeman in Pittsburgh. And I would leave Jesse Minter and Stefanski as the honorable mentions. Again, like I said, I think it makes perfect sense for Minter to not even take a job this year if he doesn't get one of these two. And I just like Baltimore and Freeman a little bit more than Minter. Truthfully, I could see them swap too, like Flores in Pittsburgh, considering he's already coached there once, and Freeman in Baltimore. It makes plenty of sense to me. But if Freeman's not part of this, if he doesn't come, Minter is probably my slot in there over Stefanski. All right, tier two. Only two teams here in tier two. That's Atlanta and it's Arizona. It seems like every 3 years, the same teams get reskinned over and over, and they're just stuck in a cycle. These two stand out to me, though, just because overall, this is an intriguing picture. So I'll start with Atlanta. Everybody knows Atlanta does not have a first-round pick this year. They traded it to the Rams, but this defense is finally giving some return on investment here. This defense has plagued them for years and years, no matter what resources they threw at it. They are actually a really solid unit right now. Quarterbacks are a question because you have an exiting regime that brought both these guys in and spent heavily to do so. So whoever takes this job is going to need to have an answer for the quarterback position. What can we do with Kirk Cousins? What can we do with Michael Penix? What is your, either your extra strategy or what's your integration plan? The rest of this roster, though, is actually pretty nice, too. This is a solid offensive line. They've taken a small step back this year, but year over year, this is one of the most consistently stable offensive lines. So you're not walking in and an offensive coach is going to, have his entire system broken in half by an inability to block or run or anything like that. The skill positions are very solid. Bijan Robinson, running back, just had a career year. Drake London was injured, but is also very good, very exciting. There's talk about maybe re-signing Kyle Pitts because Kyle Pitts is a free agent. This team just needs a few tweaks, a little bit of depth, and they could be for real. So the other complicating factor, two things. Number one, they just hired Matt Ryan as the president of the team. And this is becoming a more common front office structure around the league. There's a couple of the teams that do this. Like, it's a vibes check. Tom Brady does this. I think Jeff Saturday does this for the Colts. So whoever they end up hiring at head coach is going to need to be signed off by Matt Ryan. The other thing is that the Falcons also fired Terry Fontenot, their GM. So they completely clean house on the football operations perspective. Whoever they hire at GM is going to want to pick the head coach. And the problem being is that you're still trying to find a GM. You are dragging out this process. And as you're trying to fill out that process, the rest of the head coaching candidates are probably going to be interviewing and then thereby being hired out to other places while you fix your front office structure. So I do think that's going to cost them at least a few of the top guys in tier one. I just don't think that they're in play. They have no reason to wait, ultimately, in my opinion. But otherwise, I think it's an okay position. I don't think it's irreparable based on what's gone wrong there. Arizona, similar conversation. They're pretty flush with talent right now. This wide receiver core, depending on whether or not, what you think you're going to get out of Marvin Harrison Jr., Michael Wilson has been awesome in his stead and has really broken out this year. Trey McBride is arguably one of the best tight ends in the NFL right now and just backed it up with another great season, broke the tight end reception record, I think. Even the defensive side of the ball, the defensive side has already been like well coached, scrappy, can hang tough, but they made really good and intensive investments in the roster this offseason. They brought in Walter Nolan, they signed Josh Sweat, they drafted Will Johnson. There's a fifth round corner that's been playing really well because they got Budda Baker. There's plenty of talent on this team, and they fell short just because, the bottom gave way and, Jonathan Gannon ended up losing the team and then got fired. But I think this is one of the healthiest rosters in the NFL, man. I really do. There are some problem spots. You might need a brand new starting five for the offensive line. I think you might be able to save one, maybe two of these guys, but you've just got to attack this position, this group, both in free agency and in the draft. And those are not quick fixes. When you do that, it's going to take a few years of gelling unless you just completely strike gold. Most of the time, that's a continuity position. That's not something you're going to fix in one office season in almost every case. The other one, obviously, is quarterback. I think the Kyler Murray experiment in the desert is over, probably best for everybody involved. And whoever takes this job is going to have to, or going to hope to be, in range for a quarterback. The one wrinkle that I don't really hear a lot of people talking about regarding Arizona is Arizona, because of their really crappy season, is they're drafting third overall in a very weak draft class. And they're kind of not in a position to take a player at their draft slot. It's just a grimy draft. We'll do draft content and stuff like that, give you more of my thoughts on that. But they're in striking range, if they want it, for one of the only quarterbacks available in this draft, and that's Fernando Mendoza coming out of Indiana. If they want him, that's probably a conversation that's being had with any prospective coaching candidate interested in this job. Listen, if you really like this guy, we go through the offseason process, we eval him. If you love it, we'll pull the trigger, we'll get it done. If they don't, I think if you find a expedient solution to Kyler, get him somewhere, get him out of the building, and then just tread water for a year. Whoever you bring in as a coach probably isn't getting fired after a year. And then if you are similarly bad without a quarterback, you are in a similar drafting slot next year in a much deeper quarterback class in 2027. That's definitely really attractive at that point. And then if you've had 2 years to work on the offensive line and other parts of the roster, again, this team and Atlanta and the Giants, I feel like could get good pretty quick if things break right for them. So the guys in this list, I still have Stefanski from up there, as well as Jesse Minter as honorable mentions. But I'm also going to throw in Clint Kubiak. That's the Seattle Seahawks offensive coordinator. So Clint was the offensive coordinator for the Saints the year before this, and then went up to Seattle and lifted the Seattle Seahawks to the number 1 seed in the NFC in his first year with Sam Darnold. And this is important because people were very nervous about, was it a one-time thing? So not only did McDonald, with only 1 year of coaching under his belt, fire his offensive coordinator and bring in Clint Kubiak, Brass also brought in Sam Darnold. So every player involved had a whole lot to lose on this going terribly in Seattle. And not only has it done well, but it's probably the biggest success story of the year. And that pretty much has cemented, in my opinion, that Clint Kubiak's getting a head coaching job this year. It's just a matter of where. I don't think he's the best candidate because he's a first timer. He's never done it, but the system is true. The success is building every single year. And I think he makes a ton of sense here. Next guy on the list, I got two more guys on this in this coaching list. Jeff Hafley, that's the defensive coordinator from the Green Bay Packers. Very curious track record here. So Jeff Hafley, defensive guy, was already the Boston College head coach just a couple of years ago, and he left that job to take a downgrade. Essentially, he came to coach defense for the Packers, and he's been arousing success. Even before they went all balls deep and got Micah Parsons in there, the Green Bay defense was playing lights out. They do really tricky stuff on the back end. Hafley kind of falls into the same type of defense as like Jesse Minter. The other thing with Hafley is prior to him becoming the head coach for Boston College, not only is Boston College Matt Ryan's alma mater, wink, wink, he was also the Niners defensive backs coach during the early Kyle Shanahan years when he first got to San Francisco. And who was Kyle Shanahan's defense coordinator? Robert Saleh. And when Robert Saleh got the head coaching position for the Jets, he tabbed Jeff Ulbrich, the defense coordinator for the Falcons right now, to come coach defense in New York. Obviously, it blows up. And then Jeff Ulbrich lands back in Atlanta again this year. And there's a lot of credence to the idea of keeping Jeff Ulbrich in place to keep defensive continuity. So while there's no direct link from Jeff Ulbrich to Jeff Hafley, they both worked under Robert Saleh. And so they're speaking the same language, even though they're not directly from the same staff. They both have coached together and are familiar with one another. With Matt Ryan as the president of Atlanta, Clint Kubiak, Gary Kubiak, Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, it's all the same offense. So much so that it's the same offense that Matt Ryan was in when Kyle Shanahan coached him up as the offensive coordinator in 2016. And that was the year that Matt Ryan was an MVP. So Matt Ryan's very familiar with this system, and you can bet that he's probably interested in it too. Last guy on the list that I'm going to put here is probably not considered in this same air, but I'm going to put in Vance Joseph. Vance Joseph is the defense coordinator for the Broncos. He's also a weird dude, not like an awkward dude, but like very eclectic, very strange overlap here. So follow me here. He's the defensive coordinator for the Broncos now, right? But years ago, he was already the head coach for the Broncos. And that ended up not working out. He gets fired. Then when Cliff Kingsbury takes the Cardinals role a couple years ago when they drafted Kyler, Vance Joseph's the defensive coordinator. And he stays and he coaches there. And then he leaves and is back with the Broncos. But it's not just a curiosity that I found. It is funny. But Vance Joseph at this point has overseen very good defenses over and over again. And this current Broncos team is freaking lights out. They lead the league in sacks. They're beyond talented, beyond scary. They got the number 1 seed this year, largely off that defense for the AFC. But he's been the man at the controls. And if he was to walk into either of these positions, they're great personnel-wise. So I think he would be able to pick up right where he left off. He would need to answer questions about the offense. So the interesting thing for Vance Joseph is he kind of has 2 backdoor options at offensive coordinator here. The first one would be he could hire or poach a Sean Payton disciple if Sean Payton lets him go. The only one that he couldn't block is Davis Mills. And Davis Mills is a former quarterback, brand new, like very green head coach. But his name has been on fire in the media recently. I don't know too much about him as a coach, but I tend to think that, it makes sense if you just lazily connect the dots. Bo Nix has looked very good going from year 1 to year 2. He looks great. And Davis Mills is the quarterback's coach for the Broncos. He could poach him. The other interesting name that would be if he's the kind of mellow, unbothered guy that Vance Joseph is, I think it would make a lot of sense. And it's Cliff Kingsbury. So if Vance brings him under his arm and goes, listen, dude, I've been a head coach and I got demoted and I'm coaching defense now. You've been a head coach. And if you don't get a head coaching opportunity this year, this cycle, you should come coach offense with me. And then so the 2 of them could have been hopping between their respective teams. So it would be kind of weird to see Cliff Kingsbury back in Arizona as the offensive coordinator, just because of how things ended with Kyler and everything. There's no way that's a workable relationship. That has to be solved expediently. But I think it would be really funny. If I'm picking these two jobs here, I'll pick Clint Kubiak for the Atlanta Falcons because I just think he gets a good sign off from Matt Ryan, knows the system, a very bright guy, and I feel like he can, work through the quarterback situation. And then Arizona, I'm gonna give to Stefanski. I was very close putting Stefanski in Atlanta. Ultimately, what drove me away from it is that if I'm Stefanski, I just spent 6 years, and you could say that it was longer, but I just spent 6 years coaching offenses with quarterbacks that were just terrible and situations that were just untenable. And I feel like I could walk on water and get any job I want within reason. If I'm going to get a fresh start and a fresh chance somewhere else, do I really want to put myself right back in a situation where I don't have a sure thing at quarterback? At the very least, there's a quicker route to a quarterback for Stefanski in Arizona than there is in Atlanta. Honorable mentions being Vance Joseph and Jeff Hafley. All right, last tier, tier 3. 4 teams in this tier. You got Cleveland, you got Las Vegas, you got Miami, you got Tennessee. So these are all common similarities in every coaching cycle. These are flawed rosters, flawed situations. They're not necessarily horrible. They're not necessarily the worst in the league, but they're just less attractive than what else is available. Cleveland is an interesting one because it's not an attractive job yet, but it could be next year if they continue to load up on picks. By this time next year, the Deshaun Watson contract will be off the books. That cap is freed up. That's a massive, big deal for building a team, especially somebody just coming in. This defense is borderline elite. Myles Garrett just set the NFL sack record this year. Whether or not that stays elite for longer than this year, defense is very volatile from year to year. No one can say, but regardless of what happens on defense, this entire offense needs a facelift, top to bottom. This offensive line is ragged and old and brittle. Almost nobody's under contract this coming year. The quarterbacks, you saw a little bit from Shadur Sanders, from Dylan Gabriel. They probably still need to bring in a veteran just to steer the ship in a proper direction. The wide receiver talent is gone, just not existent. The one bright spot is the draft picks that they made this past year. Both the running backs that they drafted look pretty nice. The tight end that they drafted looked pretty nice as well. But everything else, rip it down to the studs. You could still do a couple of tweaks on defense, but again, this is kind of a strange situation. Like, you're close, but you're not going to be able to pry the biggest, best names in this cycle. I think you're going to have a better shot next year to do that. Las Vegas, I mean, is there a more disappointing team? Like, not relative to expectation, but just like having to watch them. Like, even the Titans and the Browns look more inspired than the Raiders did this year. The Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly experiment just was an absolute abject disaster. It was so bad they didn't even get full evals on the players that they drafted this year. Like, Jack Betch was one of their second round wide receivers that barely even played this year. And there was rumors that he just didn't fit what Pete Carroll wanted to do on offense or what Chip Kelly wanted to do on offense. And you as the GM, you're like, yo, I'm giving you these guys that, this is the eval. This is what we decided on. Why is he not playing? You drafted a running back 6th overall and the offensive line completely shat itself. And that at current is looking like a wasted pick. Not that Ashton Genty's a bad player, but you could have gone so many other directions with that pick if he basically was a non-factor for you as a rookie. Brock Bowers is probably their best player. Mac Crosby first. That's their best player. And then Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers was hurt most of this year. It is just still a talent-barren roster. No direction. I feel like they've just been spinning the wheels for a while at this point. The silver lining, though, is being the worst means you get the best pick. And that means you're in the driver's seat from Fernando Mendoza if you want him. You're also in the driver's seat to trade a interested team a crap load of picks, which can help you accelerate this rebuild. And so that's kind of interesting if you are interested in this job. The other thing is that even without major personnel changes, specifically to the offensive line, I feel like just an adequate coaching upgrade could make such a huge difference for this team. People forget it's only been a year, but people forget that Josh Jacobs was running just fine through the majority of this same 5 starting offensive linemen. Not exactly the same, but, not that team under Josh McDaniels was good either, but this offensive line, we saw better play. We saw the talent come through on this group, and it just in that iteration of the Raiders, and this year was just completely disappeared. That's why we were talking about why Ashton Genty kind of made sense. But, there's a lot of work that needs to be done here. This is not a quick fix. God bless whoever takes this job, I got to tell you. The Dolphins. This is another interesting one. Miami's roster today looks decent, but we may be looking at like the calm before the storm or, the day before the music died. This team, if you look at the bones of it, it is old. There is no cap room and there is no depth. Your best player, Tyreek Hill, suffered a catastrophic knee injury. We don't even know if he's going to be back in a timely manner, and he's due a whole lot of money. I think the Tua experiment has run its course as well. And the difference with the Tua situation versus the Kyler situation is that you can get out of Kyler's contract like pretty easily. You can't do that with Tua's. If you want to move on from him, no one is trading for that contract. You have to cut him, which means you have to eat that dead cap. And that's where when you factor in those things, then you factor in how old this team is, you factor in how few of its big players are still under contract, you're kind of left with a kind of a ragged roster. It's kind of ugly. The moves have not been facilitated yet. I mean, they just fired Mike McDaniel late in the process. So the other thing is that this team also just hired a new GM, John Eric Sullivan, I think. I'm not up on the executives, but he's from the Packers. That's a solid organization. So with a first-time GM and the amount of work that you need to do on this roster, it's a project. It's not a platform job. So whoever takes this job, we'll see how that goes. And the last one here is the Titans. So it's a similar story with the Titans. The one difference, though, is that they may have a quarterback. Cam Ward, the lone bright spot is that Cam Ward survived his rookie year without dying. It was not good. Certainly was not good, but you saw the flashes that you needed to see. You saw him start to figure stuff out, even through all the wreckage that was going on in this team. This is still an abjectly talent-barren roster, almost as bad as the Raiders, like almost. Not the Raiders, but almost. And it's an opportunity for a blank canvas if you're into that type of thing. If you strike out if you strike out on the two top tiers, somebody that really wants the job or really wants to prove themselves can take one of these four jobs. So I've still got honorable mentions, Vance Joseph and Jeff Hafley from tier 2. I'm also going to add in 2 more candidates here, as well as I'm kind of cheating, but I'll get there. So Robert Saleh. Robert Saleh is the defense coordinator for the Niners. So he's the former defense coordinator and the current defensive coordinator, because in between there, he was the Jets head coach. He coached pretty decent defense, really got them up to play and everything, but he just ran out of road on offense. That was the Zach Wilson team. They just could not get anything going on offense from start to finish, ended up getting fired and then landed back with the Niners. The cool thing about Saleh, though, is not only he is a solid culture guy, he's also got numerous inroads to offensive coordinator options. It's always a big question when you're the defensive guy. Okay, well, who's going to run the offense? I mean, he's been around the Shanahan-McVay tree so long, I'm sure he can find basically anyone to run the offense at this point. There's just so many relationships that tree has spanned. His calling card, though, is he is one of the best defense coordinators at squeezing water out of a stone. The clip that the Super Bowl Niners were playing at that point underneath him, and even being back to the same team, having many of the same players on the roster, and then losing them all to injury, like Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, like half their defense was just on the shelf, and they're playing in the divisional round. Like they just beat the Eagles. Like, it's not a good defense, but Robert Saleh is the difference between what makes the Niners and the Bengals, because the Bengals did not have the ability to close those gaps on the defensive shortcomings. The Niners do with Saleh. So he's a talent elevator, and he's a proven motivator. If you can get the Jets to get up and play, that's a check in my book. So the candidate that I'm going to cheat and say is promoted coordinators. So there's actually 3 of them that make a whole lot of sense for 3 of these 4 jobs. First one is going to be Jim Schwartz. That's the Browns defensive coordinator. So number 1, he's a former head coach, like many, many years ago, but still happened. He's held the job. If Cleveland is maybe trying to bide their time and shoot for the moon next year, he could be a good short-term coach that provides defensive continuity, because that's the one great thing about the Browns right now is their defense. It would make sense to me if you kept him on as a defensive coordinator the same way I talked about with Jeff Ulbrich on the Falcons, but it also makes sense to promote him as a team that isn't going to hire or isn't going to attract the exciting prospects. Then Patrick Graham, that's the Raiders defensive coordinator. He's another short-term guy. He's low risk. He's already been in the building. The other decrepit angle to this is that because of the Raiders' dysfunction, they are still paying Pete Carroll. That's Josh McDaniels. That's Antonio Pierce. And I forgot who came before Antonio Pierce. Man, there's been a lot of turnover over there. So, even just from a financial standpoint, he could be one of the cheaper options. And he also kind of makes sense as a mea culpa offering to Max Crosby, who, by all reports, the Raiders really pissed him off at the end of the year with how they fell apart, fired everybody, and then shut him down for the year. You can look into the Twitter videos and posts and all that stuff, but maybe it's just a comfort pick for Max Crosby. The third promoted coordinator is Anthony Weaver, and that's the Finns defensive coordinator. Dolphins, that is. He did really good work, similar to Saleh. What he did with that Miami defense, specifically that secondary was supposed to be one of the worst ever, like just by preseason estimates. And they were good, but they were not a disaster. And same thing with the front. The front was very good. He's got a Baltimore background. That's another feather in his cap. And he's already in-house. It's different, like with guys like Patrick Graham and Jim Schwartz. They're not really garnering head coaching interest. It's just kind of like a convenience, or it fills some other need. Anthony Weaver has been a sought-after name. Like, he's serious in these circles. So it's a short-term thing that could actually have a ceiling to something more, which is usually not the case here. And the last guy I'll throw in here is Mike McCarthy. So he's another relatively safe pick. He's got a proven 12-step program for franchise rehab. He has an established baseline of success, was able to back that up after his Green Bay Packers tenure by going to the Cowboys and turning them around. Now, the difficulty with Mike McCarthy is that he somewhat has a short shelf life. It tends to get stale pretty quick. And then the only question becomes, how patient is the team that just hired him? So he's viable, albeit, but he's capable of bringing teams up to a level of competency. And all of the teams I just listed, they could use the help. So he would make sense as well. So if I'm picking these guys right now, I think they promote Jim Schwartz in Cleveland to head coach. I think Vance Joseph, honorable mention from tier 2, gets the Raiders job. And that would be really cool. I think that makes sense if you're trying to make Max Crosby happy. You get a proven defensive coordinator in there, a guy who actually knows the conference too, because he's leaving Denver. And you're bringing Cliff Kingsbury there. I think that's enough to work with if you are interested in taking Fernando Mendoza. That makes sense to me. Miami, I go Jeff Hafley. Again, he's been a head coach. He's already done it. And nice, neat through line between Packers defensive coordinator and Packers executive, now hired as the GM. And then Tennessee, I could literally flip a coin whether it's Saleh or Mike McCarthy. I ended up landing on Saleh just because he's got a bit more untapped potential. I think he is going to have better pull getting someone to call the offense for him than Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy, at least offensively, he goes as far as his offense can take him and doesn't really provide anything on the defensive side in that sense. Whereas Saleh is he's the shepherd of the defense. He's going to pull that team along with defense and might get similar results on offense. All right. That is my predictions. I'm very excited to be wrong, but I put a lot of thought into what actually makes sense. Before I go, I just do want to do a couple of offense coordinator, defensive coordinator thoughts. The hot names for offensive coordinator right now, Mike McDaniel and Cliff Kingsbury. And I do not like either of them for the Philly job at all. I don't think either of them makes sense whatsoever. On the Mike McDaniel side, that's a crap ton of outside zone. I do not see 29-year-old Saquon Barkley running that much outside zone. It's way too much on his body. It's not even where he's best. Like, he can run some outside zone, but that's never been his bread and butter. He's a lot better between the tackles. And McDaniel, like, if you can just watch the difference. Go watch Dolphins tape and go watch Eagles tape, like good Eagles tape. You don't have to watch this year. This year sucked. But like, Devon Achane is like a speed demon. He tears around the corner. Like, that's a completely different thing. And I think there's also some personnel constraints that don't make sense. Same thing with Cliff Kingsbury. Cliff Kingsbury, I've never been a huge fan of, and I think he's a little too radioactive for Sirianni because he has a lot of gravitas that comes with him. And I think that like I said before, if Sirianni doesn't nail this OC hire, he's probably going to be on the way out of Philly. And Cliff's offense is just kind of a short shelf life. Sorry. He really struggles to not funnel his offense completely through the tight ends, not just the passing game, but the run game. And the amount of issues that the Eagles already had this year with their tight ends in the run game was a major reason why that offense never got off the ground. And if you're putting somebody where that's been a weakness in their game for a while, that has a potential to be a disaster. It's really early in the search because they just parted ways with Kevin Patullo. They throw out perspective, possible names. I've also heard like Ole Miss Charlie Weiss Jr. That's a wild name. If I've got to pick a couple right here, right now, Brian Dable, I think, can still call a decent offense. I just think he ended up making too many mistakes as the Giants head coach, but he's got, some trickum-dickum to him. I think he would make sense in a better offensive environment, specifically the offensive line that he never had in New York. If he can get more creative and scheming those looks open better than the way Patullo was able to, I think that makes sense too. But either way, whoever they bring in, it needs to be someone that's able to work with Hurts, because there's a lot, and I mean a lot, of heat coming out of that camp where people are, whether it's true or not, essentially just calling Hurts, not a great quarterback, like wants things dumbed down, wants things simple. And you're not going to build dynasties or even be successful year over year if simple only works when every other piece around you is top tier offensive elite. Attrition sets in way too fast in the league. You saw what happened to the offensive line this year. You need to be able to pull the best out of Jalen Hurts, even if it's something he's not even comfortable with. You got to get those results out of there. Mike McDaniel to Detroit is the dream. Okay, kids? It's not to Philly. It's not to anywhere else. Mike McDaniel to Detroit is the way. So I do have some offensive line personnel concerns regarding Mike McDaniel. They've got a really beefy offensive line, whereas McDaniel had a lot of light foot, wide zone blockers. But he's also not a stranger of working around those issues. That's what's made him, what's made his rushing attack really good in Miami. But bringing back that dynamic element to the run game, I mean, Jahmyr Gibbs was awesome this year, but could you imagine Jahmyr Gibbs in the passing game and the run game the way that Devon Achane was used this year? I think it's a perfect fit. You grab another back in there. The positive to the Detroit offensive line situation is that you're giving Mike McDaniel leaps and bounds a better interior run blocking that he never had. He never had the luxury because they couldn't run short yardage in Miami. If you give him those second and fives, second and fours, because you had an awesome inside run, you could really unlock that. And the cherry on top, the peak of the Mike McDaniel offense was with Tua, Tyreek Hill, and Jalen Waddle. Can you imagine how he could potentially unlock that next level tier for Jameson Williams in this offense? And then having, Savvy Amon-Ra St. Brown doing that stuff. You could get Sam Laporta in there. I mean, it would just be high flying. You thought the Ben Johnson Lions was good. If there's any coordinator that could get them back to that clip or better, it's Mike McDaniel for me. It's not even close. David Blau to Washington, I have no comment, like just none. I made an offhand comment about if potentially Davis Webb was available for a offensive coordinator position. He's just so young and so unproven. Like, that is Blau. Like, Blau was only playing quarterback for the Lions a little while ago, and then he got promoted to offensive assistant, quarterback coach, whatever he was, and now he's calling the offense for Washington. So everything on the books for Washington reportedly was that Cliff and Quinn was a mutual separation for both parties, and they just had differing opinions on like what to do for Jaden Daniels, I guess. How do you, as Dan Quinn, go from Cliff Kingsbury to David Blau? Like, we don't know anything about David. Like, I just don't know what I'm supposed to do. I mean, it seems like a responsible hire as it pertains to Daniels because he's a former quarterback, but this just has poison pill all over it. It could be really bad. This regime cannot afford another step back with how poorly this season went for the Commanders. The Bucs. So the Bucs still have to hire an offensive coordinator because they fired Josh Guizard. I think they could do, they're going to throw their hat in the ring for Mike McDaniel. They're going to throw their hat in the ring for, maybe Brian Dable, who knows, or whoever falls from the coaching search up top. But I think they could do worse than Brian Callahan. It kind of feels like forever ago now, but before he was the head coach in Tennessee, he was the offensive coordinator for Joe Burrow when Joe Burrow became a thing and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and everybody was lighting the world on fire. I think that they, first of all, have the personnel to run that. And he's a decent fit with Baker because Baker does have that chuck it deep mentality and isn't afraid to mix it up. Because Todd Bowles is always gonna live and die by who he gets calling the offense. Before Liam Cohen was I can't even remember now. I can't even remember, so many names cycling in and out. But they lose both their coordinators back to back, and it's Dave Canales. It's unfortunate that happens to you, but you gotta find ways to adapt and adjust. So if they don't have another person they can promote, I think I would go with Brian Callahan. The last one I'll say on defense is Jonathan Gannon's probably the best defense coordinator available. He would make sense basically anywhere. Commanders, Cowboys, literally anywhere. I don't know what the Cowboys are doing here, but they're digging for gold with names that I barely know, like Ephraim Banda. I don't even know if I'm saying that. Durante Jones. Like, I'm just here for whatever the Cowboys are cooking. Like, I don't know. But that's gonna do it. That's gonna do it. So I just wanted to get these coaching predictions out in the wild. That way I can stand on my own 2 feet in case I'm right, just in case, so I don't have to come from a hindsight standpoint. But this is predominantly going to be a dynasty-focused football podcast, but there's a lot of NFL nuance that you can weave into that stuff, and I'm excited to do that type thing. So if that sounds cool, do all of the interactions and things and keep me in your feed, and I will keep feeding you content like this or anything else that you suggest. But until then, have a good one.